Eleanor Vance did not appear in the yearbook. There was no photo of her on the wall of honor. To most people at the Sterling Conservatory of Music, she was merely part of the background. The middle-aged woman in a grey coat, wearing soft shoes that made no sound, always appearing just in time to hand over keys, make coffee, tidy up the rehearsal schedule. No one paid attention. No one asked where she came from. But she was not a janitor. Her official title was Operations Coordinator. It sounded important, but no one really knew what it meant. Dr. Finch, the head of the piano department, often referred to her as the ghost of Sterling, and he said it with a sneer. In a place full of brilliant young prodigies where pressure burned like fire, Eleanor existed like a suspicious silence. She never smiled, and she never played the piano, at least not in front of anyone. Leo Sterling, the brightest star of the Academy and grandson of the founder, was struggling in a soundproof practice room with Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, Rach 3. Pianists often called it the Beast because of its brutal difficulty. Leo struck every note with perfection like a machine. But the music didn't come alive. After failing the cadenza 3 times, he stood up, slammed his hands on the piano, and cursed, "This is insane. Why can't I feel anything?" He ripped the score from the stand, threw it onto the chair, and stormed out. The door slammed shut. The room was empty. 5 minutes later, Eleanor stepped inside. She didn't touch anything but the piano. She stood still, then walked to the bench, sat down. She didn't open the score, didn't touch the keys, but her hands began to move. Her fingers danced in the air just millimeters above the keyboard. No sound came out, but the speed, precision, and expression of her movements made it impossible to look away. She played the most difficult cadenza in silence. The door opened. Leo had returned to retrieve his forgotten score. He froze at the doorway. He heard nothing, but he saw the music. For several seconds, Eleanor didn't realize she was being watched. When she stopped and opened her eyes, Leo had already stepped quietly inside. He didn't smile, didn't ask anything. He just said one thing. "Who are you?" Eleanor stood up, gently dusted the bench. Didn't answer. Then she left, leaving Leo with the piano and a question that had just begun to echo in his mind. A question that would change everything. Leo couldn't forget that moment. For a week afterward, every time he entered the practice room, he glanced around, as if searching for something. But Eleanor never repeated her silent performance. She returned to her usual routine, clearing cups, managing room schedules, checking piano strings. Still, Leo started leaving his score open on the music stand. It was always the most difficult passages from Rach 3. He never said it aloud, but he carried a faint hope that once again Eleanor would play for him, even if only with her silent hands. One morning he caught her dusting the Fazioli. Not missing the chance, he approached, trying to act casual. "Did you study music?" he asked. Eleanor didn't look up. "I just clean the rooms, Mr. Sterling. You know that's the second cadenza, right?" He pointed at the score, still open on the piano. Eleanor glanced briefly, then said softly, without looking at him, "You're trying to conquer the notes, Leo. Try letting them tell their story through you." The words stopped Leo cold. No professor had ever said that to him. What started as a small joke, baiting the ghost to appear, turned into genuine curiosity. He found ways to talk to her more. Sometimes just asking what she thought of a passage, pretending it was for an outsider's opinion. Each time, Eleanor only said 1 or 2 sentences, but every word struck with uncanny precision. She didn't teach. She touched, then withdrew, as if testing whether he was ready to listen. Not everyone appreciated that. Dr. Finch happened to catch Leo speaking with Eleanor in the hallway. He walked over, his tone icy. "You seem to have more free time than I thought, Sterling." Leo tried to stay composed. "I was just asking a few questions." Finch glanced at Eleanor, clearly seeing her as invisible. "You don't need to find inspiration from the cleaning staff. Emotion doesn't replace technique." Eleanor said nothing, but her gaze sharpened. At that moment, Isabella Rossi, the legendary conductor and a member of the board, was making a surprise visit to the Academy. As she passed down the hallway, she paused. From a distance, she saw Eleanor standing beside the piano, her hand resting gently on the lid. In that instant, she squinted. Those hands. She had seen them somewhere before, on stage, under the lights, on a night she could never forget. A long-buried memory began to surface. Leo couldn't sleep the entire night after speaking with Eleanor. Her words, "You're trying to conquer the notes, Leo. Try letting them tell their story through you," kept playing in his mind like an unfinished melody. He began playing Rachmaninoff again, not just to conquer it, but to understand it. Yet each time his fingers touched the keys, the pressure weighed heavier on his shoulders. He was a Sterling, the founder's grandson, the heir. He wasn't allowed to make mistakes. The dress rehearsal for the gala took place in the grand auditorium. On stage, a white spotlight shone directly on the $500,000 Fazioli piano. In the audience, major donors board members and the media filled every seat. Leo sat down, back straight, fingers poised on the keys. He began. Rage 3 rang out with absolute precision. No mistakes, no hesitations, but also nothing that made you feel like a human was playing. Leo repeated each passage like a drill. His shoulders were rigid, his eyes were blank. With every chord change, his heart pounded like it was fighting the rhythm. When he finished, the room fell silent for a few seconds. Not the silence of awe, but the kind where no one knows how to respond. Dr. Finch stood up, pretending to be pleased, but his eyes swept the donors, searching for reactions. There were no nods, just a few polite smiles. The atmosphere felt like a party where the host had forgotten the wine. He stepped off the stage and walked straight to the refreshment table where Eleanor was pouring tea for guests. Miss Vance Finch said, his voice laced with sarcasm, "What did you think of the performance just now? Surely someone with your experience in dusting pianos must have an artistic opinion." The whole room turned toward her. Eleanor set the teapot down, looked up, and met his gaze. He played every note she said, her voice soft but clear. But he missed the music. Silence. Finch froze, his face reddening. No one dared breathe. Leo stood backstage, having heard every word. His heart skipped, not from offense, but from the sting of truth. Isabella Rossi, seated in the front row, tilted her head slightly. She had heard that voice before, many years ago, in a performance that all of New York had remembered. A young girl with hands so fast they bordered on unreal. A name began to echo in her memory like a voice from the past. The phantom hand. The clock on the wall read 7:57 p.m., 3 minutes to showtime. Backstage at the Sterling Theatre, the air felt suffocating. The clatter of high heels, murmuring phones, and bursts of walkie-talkie commands blended into a shrill, chaotic noise. But at the center of it all, Leo Sterling sat motionless on a wooden bench. The fluorescent light above cast a pale glow on his face, damp with sweat at the temples. His hands trembled uncontrollably. His eyes were wide and unfocused, as if he'd just woken from a bad dream and couldn't remember where he was. From behind, Isabella Rossi approached and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Are you all right?" Leo swallowed hard. "I can't feel the keys. My fingers, they won't listen." The sound of the piano being tuned on stage made his heart jump. He bent forward, clutching himself, breath shallow and rapid. A full-blown panic attack. God help us, the Academy director muttered. If he doesn't go on stage, this gala is dead. Dr. Finch stormed in his face, flushed with fury. What the hell is going on, Sterling? You're not allowed to break down right now. Tonight isn't just a concert. It's next year's budget. It's the Sterling Foundation. It's the press, the donors. It's the truth. Isabella cut in coldly. And the truth is, he can't play. Finch turned to her, almost yelling. Then who the hell is going to play Rachmaninoff? You silence. No one had an answer. Suddenly, from a shadowed corner, a calm, clear voice rang out, I will. Every head turned. Eleanor Vance stood there, no longer in her grey uniform. She wore a simple black dress, her hair neatly tied back. Her demeanor was composed, showing not a trace of someone about to perform in front of the elite of the art world. Finch burst out laughing. Don't be ridiculous. Who do you think you are? Isabella stepped forward. Her eyes widened as if seeing a ghost. Carnegie Hall, 1998. She stared at Eleanor, struggling to believe what stood before her. The debut that became legend. They called you the Phantom Hand. Then you vanished. My God, it's you. The Academy director was stunned. Finch went silent. Leo, though still shaking, looked up. All eyes were on Eleanor. She gave a small nod. I know the piece. No score needed. No one objected. No one dared. Because in that moment, everyone felt the same thing. Tonight was not going to end the way they had planned. The main stage of the Sterling Conservatory was bathed in soft amber light. The orchestra was ready. The lighting director glanced at the clock one last time and nodded. The backstage door opened. It wasn't Leo Sterling. Eleanor stepped out. The entire 600-seat auditorium seemed to freeze. Surprise spread like wildfire. A few donors exchanged confused glances. A New York Times reporter leaned forward. No one knew what was happening except Isabella Rossi, who sat trembling slightly in her seat, her eyes locked on Eleanor. Eleanor walked straight to the Fazioli piano at center stage. The main spotlight hit her squarely. No one followed. No announcer gave an explanation. Backstage, Dr. Finch hissed, Director, you can't let this happen. Who is she? A staffer? A liability? A joke? The Academy director remained motionless, hands clasped, eyes unblinking. Isabella Rossi turned her voice low, but with a commanding weight that silenced the room behind the curtains. Carnegie Hall, 1998. I was there. She stepped in front of Finch. Eleanor Vance is the Phantom Hand. 15 years ago, she made all of New York weep with Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto. Then she vanished. No one knew why. No one could find her. But now she's here. And you dare call her staff? Finch backed away, face pale. On stage, Eleanor pulled out the piano bench. No one brought her a score. She didn't need one. The audience was still reeling. A few murmured. One young donor whispered, "What is going on?" Then Eleanor placed her hands on the keys. She didn't look around. No introduction, no explanation. Just a woman, alone, at a piano. A long silence stretched. Then she began, with the very piece Leo had left behind, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. A shockwave had been unleashed, and the concert hall would never be the same again. Eleanor placed her hands on the keys. No sheet music, no conductor. Just her and the Fazioli under a spotlight that caught even the smallest of movements. The last time she sat before a grand stage was 15 years ago. Back then, the applause crashed like ocean waves. Now, only silence. A kind of silence that waits heavy and sharp as a blade. She took a breath and played the first note. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 began. At first, the audience heard only the technique. Eleanor's fingers glided across the keys with astonishing speed. She didn't play the notes, she released them. The sound erupted, not as a flawless rehearsal, but as a confession. The orchestra chased after her, as if swept into a current greater than themselves. The conductor, who had prepared only for Leo, immediately adapted the panic in his eyes, giving way to laser focus. She wasn't just playing music. She was telling a story. The story of someone who had lost everything: career, identity, opportunity, and was now using the very thing that once broke her to rise again. Her right hand, where nerves had never fully healed, suddenly faltered in a trill that came like a storm. The entire hall held its breath, bracing for collapse. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She turned the stumble into a deliberate silence, a haunting low note, before diving back into the tempest. Her flaw had become part of the music, a scar that told a story. When the adagio arrived, the hall went completely still. An aging critic from the Times, who had reviewed her debut 15 years earlier, quietly removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. Backstage, Leo stood behind the curtain. His eyes were wide. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the center of the world, and he didn't feel threatened. He saw what he had always lacked. Then came the cadenza, the most difficult passage. Eleanor sat upright, her breathing uneven, but she didn't hesitate. Her hands moved as if there were no resistance. A few in the audience forgot to breathe. A young student gripped the armrest of her chair. Eleanor's playing had transcended sound. It was living proof of something technique alone could never create: experience, pain, and existence itself. When the final note faded, Eleanor kept her hands on the keys for 3 more seconds. No sound, no movement. Then she let go. No one clapped at first. No one dared shatter the moment. The hall was suspended in a silence so deep, so sacred, it felt like standing before something beyond the boundaries of music. 3 seconds later, the first applause rang out. Then everything erupted. The applause lasted 5 full minutes. No one remained seated. The audience rose to their feet. They weren't just celebrating a masterful performance, they were witnessing something larger than music. Eleanor stood up. She didn't bow. She didn't raise her hand in thanks. She simply looked straight at the audience as if to say, "I'm still here." The orchestra rose with her. The conductor exhaled in relief. Donors whispered among the crowd. But this time, no one spoke about money. No one discussed the technique. They spoke of emotion, of the soul. After a few minutes, the MC stepped out, visibly moved and slightly shaken. "Ladies and gentlemen, the artist you just heard is Eleanor Vance." Whispers rippled through the hall. Some were shocked. Some didn't believe it. Eleanor stepped up to the microphone. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to reach the last row. "Thank you. I have nothing to promote. No album, no tour. I just have a story." She paused, then continued. 15 years ago, I debuted at Carnegie Hall. They called me the Phantom Hand. People said I had a future. But then, a car accident took my teacher's life, and I lost feeling in my right hand. The hall fell utterly silent. Not even a breath. I was no longer an artist, no longer anyone. I disappeared, worked behind the scenes, here, at Sterling. Music was the only thing I kept, not to share, but to survive. Her eyes drifted to the faculty row. Dr. Finch avoided her gaze. His face was pale. He stepped back slightly unconsciously, leaning against the wall as if his legs could no longer support him. His entire worldview, built on technique scores and reputation, had just collapsed into ash from a single story and a performance no one had anticipated. But music doesn't belong to fame. It doesn't belong to report cards funding. or titles. Music, if it's still alive, will always find its way back. An elderly woman in the front row, the primary donor, began to cry. Eleanor stepped back from the microphone. She said nothing more. She didn't need to. Backstage, Leo Sterling emerged from the shadows. He walked toward her. No awkwardness, no apology. Just a question, his voice soft but sincere. Will you teach me not how to play, but how to feel? Eleanor looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. 1 month later, a new brass plaque shimmered in the soft morning light of the east hallway. At the Academy, Eleanor Vance, artist in residence beneath it, a smaller inscription etched in the same formal font. Course Emotional Dynamics in Performance Registration opened at 9:00 a.m. By 9:05, every seat was filled not out of curiosity, but because for the first time, this academy had someone who truly lived for music, not just lived by it. Dr. Finch had resigned. No official statement, no farewell, just an empty office and a Steinway piano with its lid closed. Rumors spread the main donor had pulled funding due to a lack of faith in the school's leadership. Isabella Rossi was appointed the new artistic advisor. She didn't restructure the academy, but she changed its atmosphere. Word began to spread among the artist community Sterling had been reborn. Leo Sterling was no longer the academy's brightest star, and now he no longer needed to be. He was no longer seen at the front tables in the cafeteria. Instead, he sat with first-year students listening as they spoke of the fear of stepping on stage for the first time. For the first time, he didn't talk about himself, he simply listened. In a small rehearsal room behind the main stage, Eleanor sat beside Leo. No stage, no lights, no audience. In front of them, an old piano. A few of its keys are slightly worn, but still carry weight in their sound. Eleanor didn't ask him to play. She simply said, "Now just listen. Listen to the silence between the notes. That's where the real story is." Leo placed his hands on the keys. He didn't play, he let them rest, closed his eyes. Eleanor placed her hand beside his, a hand that had outlived youth, a hand that had once trembled in fear of losing itself. Now it was steady. 2 hands, one old, one young, resting side by side, creating no sound. But in that silence, something began to echo, a quiet belief that music is still alive and people can always begin again, starting from the smallest of things. The screen fades to black. Text appears. Some voices don't need to be loud. They just need to be heard. And you, what is your music? What makes you feel truly alive? The story of Eleanor Vance is not just about a return to the stage after 15 years of absence. It's a reminder to all of us that true value lies not in fame, but in staying true to what makes your heart tremble. We live in a world that worships achievement, where technique is often praised more than emotion, where pressure can kill passion. But this story shows us that music, like life, only holds meaning when it is felt, not scored. You may lose your reputation. You may lose status, glory, even yourself. But if you keep your love for what you do, you can always begin again, not from the top, but from the silence between the notes. We believe everyone has a music inside them, something that makes you more alive, more human. Don't let the world silence you. Find that voice again. Even if it's small, let it be yours. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit follow on Toch Story to never miss more meaningful tales about people, choices, and what makes life worth living. Toch Story, where stories don't have to be loud, but are always worth hearing.